Well, hello, everybody out there that is listening or watching. Today is going to be a little bit different. This is a Casual Friday episode, and it's going to be really casual, partly because I'm the only one that is here right now. Ever since the COVID-19 outbreak, the stay-at-home orders, the quarantine, all of these things, it has been a little more difficult for us to get together. However, we have been planning for a while for me to do a solo podcast to basically just speak to you, our audience, and kind of share my heart and really the whole motivation behind the Miserable Company. So real quick, a little bit of history. If you aren't aware, you can go back to podcast episode 1 and you could see this story. But I'm going to go ahead and share with you really quick an abridged version of how the Miserable Company even came to be. So first of all, a few years ago, I really got into studying millionaires and billionaires and was just really trying to figure out like what set them apart from ordinary heirs, people that didn't have bukus of money. Let's call it like the middle class or the lower middle class, whatever. I was trying to figure out really what set them apart. Like, were they just born into money? Were they just living off of inheritance? Did they get lucky? What happened? So I began to look into a lot of biographies and into the lives of a lot of millionaires and billionaires. The Investors podcast, We Study Billionaires, actually was a big part of this. I found that podcast and began to listen to that, and it really sent me down this track to just figure out what really made these people tick and what made them different, and what about their mindset was maybe different than mine. So I read a stack of books and I listened to this podcast and I watched videos and I just did as much research as I could. I obsessed over it for probably about 2 years. During this research, I began to find these similarities between all of these people. These millionaires and these billionaires seem to have certain things in common. So for my personal use, I began to make a list. So it was things like they took risk, or what we would perceive as risk. They would take all of their money and put it into a thing, or they would sell everything they have and put it into this idea. So that was one thing that I noticed. Another big one is that a lot of these people started working when they were very young. A lot of them had paper routes when they were just young men. They would go out at 8, 9 years old, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and deliver papers. And there were several millionaires and billionaires who had that same story. So anyways, I began to track some of these similarities. During this process, I made these bullet points, and then I would put little explanations of kind of who did it and how they did it. And before long, I noticed that, wow, this is kind of an outline of a book. So I began the process of writing a book, basically just for myself. To make a long story short, I completed this book, and it just sat there for months and months and months. And I would think about it every once in a while and go, well, I guess I just did that kind of for no reason. I continued to study millionaires and billionaires. I still do. It's something that just really interests me. One day, while I was cutting my grass, by the way, cutting my grass is where all of my ideas comes from, it seems like. So that's something that I don't necessarily always enjoy doing, but I understand that there's great value in it for me, and that sometimes it just drowns out the rest of the world, and I can think and just doing that monotonous task of just pushing the lawnmower opens my mind up to do other things while I'm doing that. And a lot of times that happens to be the creation of new ideas and things like that. So I was mowing my lawn one day, and I remember where I was mowing it. I remember the direction I was facing. I remember everything about that day. When I thought about this book and thought, well, I don't even have a title for this book, And say, even if I did ever want to release it, I said, I've never even thought about the title. I haven't thought about marketing this thing at all. What would this be about? And I began to think about how there's all these like get rich books and how rich people did it and all this. And I was just like, I don't even want to, what? Forget it. I'm not going to mess with this idea at all. And, I then began to think, because I write songs and I produce, about pop music. And I've heard people say about pop music is that basically what you're doing is you're writing about the same thing over and over again. You're just trying to say it in a new or fresh way. So how can you say the same thing in a different way? Pop songs are about what? Love, heartbreak, partying, sex. Very few topics that pop music really discusses, and yet somehow they're able to reinvent that song over and over again. So I said, okay, well, there's nothing new under the sun, so maybe I'm just writing another one of those books. But like pop music, what's a way that I can kind of do it differently? First thing that popped into my head was, well, what if instead of telling people how to get rich, what if the book taught people how to stay poor? And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then what you could do is just give like the anti-advice. So if millionaires and billionaires started working early, you would say, don't start working early. If they invested, you would say, don't invest. So I was like, yeah, whatever. Wow, this is real cool. I wasn't too impressed with my own idea, but it began to kind of snowball in my head. And I was like, okay, I kind of like that, how to stay poor. So I remember one day I sat down and took my list of notes and started flipping them to the negative and thinking like, man, if somebody followed this advice, they would be miserable. And then it hit me. I was like, wait a second, this is a lot of the things people are already doing. And this is why so many people are miserable. So I went back up to the top of the document and I said, how to stay poor. And then I added, and miserable. Now, all of a sudden, it kind of clicked with me, and I was like, I kind of like this, So I began to kind of expound upon the idea, and then I had this second thought. It's like, you could continue this series of books and do how to stay fat and miserable, obviously like a health, weight loss type book. You could do how to stay lonely and miserable, and you could do a book about the psychology of relationships and just how to treat other people. You could do something like how to stay ineffective and miserable, and that could be a book on leadership. And I was like, man, this is actually really cool. So that and miserable kind of stuck. Well, then I was looking at those list of topics. I was looking at the bullet points I had about the rich people, and I said, man, I listen to podcasts. I love podcasts. I'm already seeing a plethora of content for a potential podcast. So then I was like, the miserable podcast. Well, fast forward to today, a couple years later, and you can kind of see how all of this has happened. It was funny. I spoke to a friend of mine, Jeremy, just last week, and he was saying, he discovered the podcast. We hadn't really talked about it. And he remembered a conversation we had probably about 2 years ago when he was staying at my house. And I told him this idea. And he was like, it's crazy to think about that conversation and to see now you're actually doing it. And he was talking about how encouraging and inspiring it was. And man, I tell you, it's encouraging and inspiring for me having those conversations. So here we are and we're doing it. And man, it's a lot of fun. After I had all of those revelations, I immediately knew if I wanted to do what I really wanted to do with what I eventually called the Miserable Company, I would need some help. I wouldn't be able to do as much, but I also wouldn't be able to do it at the quality at which I wanted to do it. I just couldn't handle all of it. I didn't have the skills and the know-how to do everything. So I reached out to some of my closest and most talented friends. You guys see Paulie Paul Howard a lot, Kenny Thompson, and Phil Keys. And those three guys are each, first of all, incredible human beings. They have supported and encouraged me in all sorts of endeavors, most of which now are beginning to pay dividends for even the miserable company. They have been there for everything. We've done a lot of crazy stuff together. They're super talented individuals when it comes to supervision and management, working with clients, creating content, having the aesthetic intelligence and the eye for different things, even down to the real technical things when it comes to shutter speeds and ISO and lighting and all of those things that I am clueless about. So I reached out to those guys, and man, you can really see the fruits of their labor in everything that we do. And it's been really, really cool just working with them. There's been some challenges, and we'll talk about that as well. But when we began to get together and really discuss the miserable company, one thing that I knew for sure is like, yeah, I like podcasts, but that's not going to do it for me. And yeah, I like making videos, but that's not going to do it for me. There's got to be a deeper purpose. A good friend of mine, Chris Barker, introduced me to a book called Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And that book really challenged me. And I read that just probably months before really trying to formulate what the miserable company was. And in sitting down and discussing with the guys like what the miserable company was all about, we gave it a lot of thought. And it took weeks really to really get everything down. And where we landed was at the core what I knew that I could stick with, and something that would really inspire me and give some longevity to this thing, besides just making a podcast and making some videos. And that was this, our mission statement, which is to build and encourage a community committed to enjoying life. You know, really everything that we do, the videos, the podcast, everything is just to encourage you, to encourage whoever is listening. That's really it. If we can just give a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of positivity, a little bit of inspiration, then we've done what we're trying to do. And we've seen that, and it's been such a blessing. Man, I could sit here and try to list people that have really, really bought into the miserable company vision, and I will a little bit. Some of them we don't even really know. Some of them are friends of ours, but the audience has begun to expand, and it's been really, really cool. People like the Unique Armani on Instagram has been huge and very encouraging for us. Noah Parker, Chris Mulligan. There's so many more people, and Angela. There's been like people that have just since day one have been reaching out to us, have been sharing things, and it's been huge for us. A couple of the cool stories that we've heard is people who have been inspired to either pick a passion back up that they had put down. People who have been inspired by some of our podcasts to go and begin the process of studying and getting their GED. There are people who have been inspired to go and start even side businesses that they have been putting off. And to us, this is what it's really all about. It's just trying to show everybody with our example that we don't really know what we're doing half the time. We struggle a lot with different things. But if you put a team around you, if you focus on a clear mission, and you just give it a shot, and you put all your insecurities aside, and you just put yourself out there, that there's really cool possibilities for you and for everyone. This time that we live in is crazy because distribution is free, and it's simple, and it's global. All you really have to do is do the thing that you want to do. And then there's a global market that you can tap into, and it's insane. But a lot of people let so many questions and so many what they see in themselves as shortcomings stop them. We would just like to be an example for people to say, hey, you're not going to know everything. You're not going to have everything figured out, but you can go out there and start doing that thing and just see what happens, and not be afraid to fail. and kind of put into practice some of those principles that I discovered while I was researching and studying those millionaires and billionaires. So that's it. That's really what the Miserable Company is about. We have a saying that we say sometimes in our meetings, we remind ourselves the company's miserable, so we don't have to be. So you don't have to be. And that's not something we've really put out there, but that's kind of the statement, our logo, everything, our avatar, our spokesperson that you see every once in a while, is really just the embodiment of something that we could all choose to be. We could choose to be somebody who just hates everything that they do and feels trapped and stuck, or we can take control of our lives. We can take responsibility. We can begin to change our perspective. We can see the positive instead of the negative. We can make the most of every problem, turn them into opportunities. We can do all of those things and then begin to live a life that we actually enjoy. And then on top of all that, to do that as individuals, but to come together on places like Instagram, YouTube, in real life, however we do it, to come together and just encourage one another to remember that and to live that out. Because, man, at the end of the day, right now, I'm sitting here by myself, all this craziness going on, everything's shut down. But you know what? Life is good, and we're blessed because we're breathing. And we need to remember that, and we need to remind each other of that. And the Miserable Company is just one way that we can do that, and we can do that together. So that's why we do everything that we do. Something really cool that is also happening is, despite just making our own content, we are actually working with some clients at the moment too. And there's long stories into how all of these happen, and we're going to share those at some point. But last year, we shot a music video for Andy Mineo, the OTOD music video, and that was under the Miserable Company name. The Miserable Media is how we work professionally with clients. And we've done that. We are currently working on a whole series of videos and branding with Words Played. And we are also doing another music video at the moment that we are really, really excited about. All of these things will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. We are also doing some work with Brickyard, who owns this co-working space that we work out of in Woodbridge, Virginia. They also have a location in Ashburn, and they're opening another one. And then we also have some other clients that we're working with as well. So really cool things that are happening on that side of the company as well. We're just going to continue to grow, and we're just going to continue to do this. And man, we have dreams and we have goals. Our goals are simply to grow our audience, to be sustainable, to create a business model that allows us to continue to do this and to do this more and to do this better and to do it for the long run. And really, the only reason we even want to scale and grow our audience and to become sustainable is because we would like to get this message, the message that I just referred to a couple minutes ago, just to more people. And we'd like to do it better, and we'd like to do it more often. So that's what we're doing. That's what the Miserable Company is all about. If you're out there listening, man, it's been so encouraging just to hear back from you guys. It's been so every time we get a comment on anything, it's like Christmas morning. It really is. We're enjoying it so much. We're enjoying communicating and talking with you guys, meeting new people, even if it's just via Instagram or whatever. So that's who we are. That's what the Miserable Company is. Please always feel free to reach out to us. You can email contact@themiserablecompany.com. You can reach out to any of us on Instagram. Please always feel free to engage. One of the biggest things people ask us, like, what can we do to help? We believe in what the Miserable Company is doing. The biggest thing that anybody can do for us right now is to just help us spread the message of the Miserable Company, share the podcast, share our content, share our videos, and invite people to follow us. So if you enjoy it and you're inspired and encouraged, then spread that and introduce us to other people. so that we can really, really build this community together. And it's crazy because it's already happening. We've only been doing this for like a little over 3 months, 3.5 months or something like that. I don't know, middle of January is when we started. I don't know. And it's just crazy how the community is already beginning to form. It's crazy how things that we said we wanted to do, we're doing them. And it's crazy that the whole purpose of it is also happening. And that's people who are watching the content and joining this community are then going back out and doing that same thing. They're doing things that they've wanted to do. They're starting things. They're picking things back up that they've set down. They're putting things back out front that they put on the back burner. And that is amazing to us. So I appreciate you listening today. I appreciate you being a part of this community. I really appreciate you as you share things and just put our message out there. We always want to hear from you. If you have suggestions for content, if you just want to speak to us, we would love to speak to some of you just one-on-one and get some feedback and learn from you. So please reach out to us. Share what we got with everybody. Man, we're having some fun. So glad you're along for the ride. And hopefully there's not too many more solo casual Fridays because I am tired of talking. Love you guys. See you. Thank you so much. Miserable Company. Like, follow, subscribe, share, all of those things. This thing is going to get out of hand. You better believe it. See ya.